Hi everyone and welcome to a new Words to BetBots video. Today's video is going to be about why I pick the tipsters that we do in the platform, what do I want to see from a tipster, and I'm going to break that down into three different components. So the first component is going to be your boring stats. So what am I looking for just statistically? The next part is going to be mindset. What am I looking for in terms of the conversations I'm having with the tipster? And the third thing is going to be related to just other factors that I've got in the back of my mind that are important moving forward. So yeah, let's crack on. So the first thing to consider for me in terms of the stats is I want to have sort of like a year's record minimum generally before accepting a tipster on the platform, even if it's a bit lower volume than some other tipsters, for example. I would weight it higher because it's a 12-month period. You've got to be consistent with the dealing with the emotions and having a public tipping record sort of thing. I'd like to have at least 500 tips still generally. If there's a tipster that's tipping really high odds and the ROI is a bit lower, then you kind of want to have an extra number of tips to account for that. But generally speaking, I've got like my hard and fast kind of stats I'm looking at for like a quality tipster is, if they're averaging average odds of around 1.5, you kind of like a 5% ROI is very solid. If it's closer to like 1.8 to 2, then I'd be like, delighted with like an 8 to 10% return on investment. I mean, Leo's a bit of a freak at 12%, but I don't think that's very common for that odds range. And then, when you've got higher odds, such as we've got with outside rides and the golf, you do expect a sort of higher ROI to compensate because you've got a bit more margin to work with at those higher prices. So really you're looking at kind of like 15% ROI if possible, just to sort of account for the variance and the fact it's going to be not quite as smooth a journey. But yeah, generally speaking, that is the main thing I'm looking for in those situations is at least a year of experience, an ROI of 5%, and also just making sure that generally looking for pinnacle in the exchange in terms of where people are able to bet, because you don't have to worry with limitations. There aren't many platforms that do promote Pinnacle and Betfair exchange profitability, and it's obviously a lot harder to do and harder to profit at Asian books, but it's far more sustainable to use as accounts. So yeah, those are all the kind of main considerations that I'm making statistically. The thing about, okay, so let's move on to like the mindset side of things. And I think one of the main things that actually appeals to me is when a tipster reaches out to me rather than the other way round, just because the concept itself is, pay for profit. So if you're approaching me, it's because you are actually confident inherently in your system that you do have a long-term edge. There's no money to be made from my system unless you are a profitable bettor. So I am always interested in the people that come to me and that say, oh, I'm really interested in your system because it's going to be great for me. That automatically gives me some confidence that, a bettor knows what they're doing. And, that was the case with AAA bettor. Like, wasn't really interested in going along the monthly subscription route, but got in touch with me because he said, this is actually a platform that I could see myself being a tipster on. It's very fair. I like the way it works. There's plenty of scale in the markets for it. And, I completely agreed. Talking more with him, it made sense that it was a really good fit. And looking back, it was a really good decision to have, AAA bettor on the platform first up. The second thing I look for is an understated manner of speaking in terms of their social media profile and kind of just their general demeanor. I don't want tipsters that have thousands of followers because they shout about every win. You go crazy during a good run, but then dead quiet during a bad run, and because that's very kind of, you know, a lot of the tipsters on Twitter are like that. Just because you have a personality presence or a certain amount of followers, there's absolutely no correlation in my mind between that and results. So what I'm looking for more is kind of like those, you know, the diamonds in the rough, the bettors that are under the radar. They're not getting much attention because they're not braggy and they're not wanting to self-market, and like haven't got that following as such. Yeah, I can see the potential in their records, in the way they talk, in the way they go about their business. And a lot of the time you'll find that, you know, these tipsters will be posting really good results and there's just not that much interaction that's happening, and that's perfect for the platform. And it means already you're not bringing in like someone that has lots of expectations, or like, you know, you have to make them a certain amount of income, etc. It's I do sort of feel that it's about getting people that don't have established services already but want the chance to like prove themselves in a fair way. I think it's a relationship that works out well. The next thing that I'm looking for is, I really like it if I can actually understand a tipster's angle, or like with a system or how they operate. For example, with Outside Rides, he really went into depth before we'd even started agreeing to have him having a bot service, about how the concept all works, he explained the different why jockeys from outside stables coming into a main stable, and then how that horse is going to be backed because of the fact that they want to impress those connections and then use their stable more often. It all makes a lot of intuitive sense to me. And other tipsters that I've spoken to, one's like Ben from Flopshot Golf, just the way he understands golf, the kind of metrics he's using, it's all very convincing in terms of, I feel confident even with a lower sample that he's going to be profitable just because of the way that he understands certain variables and what counts. And of course the best example is JP, because I've talked to him about tennis now for years, and I feel like over time he's helped me in terms of understanding certain mistakes I might be making with my own betting. And the same applies with him and his draws. I think he's always like adapting things a bit so that he's cutting out certain mistakes that he has used in past systems and now is kind of optimizing it, which I think is a very important quality as a bettor. The other thing that's kind of related to that is also the fact that I like a tipster that is similar to me in having an intuitive style, just because I can relate to that more, and also I feel it's easier to sustain an edge. I feel like the worry with someone using betting models, that if that variable is suddenly captured by the market, it suddenly becomes very difficult to adapt and then find an edge or create a new edge. Whereas with like my tennis and the way I approach it, there's always going to be changes in the market, and there has been changes over the years, but because I'm intuitive, I just refine my angles, or I look at things slightly differently. And, you know, there's often new opportunities that arise from the ones that, you know, are left. And I feel like that's a lot harder to do if you're purely doing it from a model-based basis. For example, there's a tennis bettor that I know from 5 years ago. I won't mention names, but it was all the stats were based on projected hold models, and that isn't sophisticated enough now, like 5 years down the line, to be beating the market, because so many bettors now use that. So I really like knowing that someone's got a process that is unique and that it's adaptable going forward in the future as well. Okay, so the final component I'm going to talk about is just other things that I'm looking at that are important to me when considering whether to take a tipster on board. One of those is betting volume, in terms of I like having a portfolio that anyone could follow almost all the bets if they could. And for that, you want it to be easy in terms of either a consistent posting time, or like a consistent, if they've got a lot of bets, it's more important to have a consistent posting time. I don't you want a situation where it's really scattered, where you've got 5 different times in the day where 10 tips are sent. You might be okay with 10 tips being sent, but you'd want it in a 5-minute spell because it's a lot more convenient for placing your bets. But also generally, I don't want too many tips on the portfolio as a whole, in terms of it not being, if you have tipsters that are like, 200 tips plus a month or whatever, I think at that point it becomes difficult to balance a portfolio as well. And if a tipster like that has a really bad run, that can sort of cause too much of an influence on the overall portfolio, and that's something I want to bear in mind moving forward. Mentally, I would like the tipster to be proactive rather than reactive. If there's a period of a bad few weeks or even a bad month or two, it shouldn't be a case of being derailed or losing their confidence, because it is like a far longer term process than that. If you're sort of on a platform like mine, it's because you feel like over the years you're gonna make profits in the end, and to always back yourself. So I am looking for, if they've been on Twitter in the past, just to kind of like their rhetoric around situations that have been difficult, whether they kind of want to, stop after a while or whatever. And, I know I'm not one to talk. I've made my mistakes in the past, but in terms of objectively analysing a tipster, I think it's important. Obviously, the size of the market helped. Like a bigger market, the higher the limits, the more margin there is for more users, and that allows the tipster to create more revenue. If you've got sort of early Bet365 markets, for example, where the price would move with just 10 subscribers at fairly limited stakes, there's not really much in it for the tipster or for me, because the prices are going to go, which isn't fair, and also there's just limited margin for growth. So that's another reason why I go for the Pinnacle and exchange betting tipsters. It does allow for that extra, for a tipster doing really well to really have that potential to grow to a high ceiling, and to really take advantage of their edge in terms of being a tipster. And also, just a general point is that, when I'm talking to a tipster, generally I'd like it so that, they're asking questions about the concept, and not directly about how much money they're going to make straight away, because it's far more about, I think, the long term and appreciating the process, and how, if they are profitable, how it can organically grow over time. So just there are things that I like to see that show a nature of level-headedness, and also someone that I can trust to work with long term, and likely to be persevere with the project, even if they're going through a difficult run, because they back themselves to get it right. The final thing I kind of want to mention on that is just I like having bettors from different sports, because it's also educational, and it also gives you some own ideas on, how might I bet on a sport, or so on and so forth. And just as someone that finds sports analytics very interesting generally, I do like having that diversity across sports, because it is ultimately fun betting. It is fun to have that range of different types of bets and different types of sports, and figuring out how things work. And I think in the future it could be one where I end up betting on some other sports because of experiences that I've had following the tipsters, which has already happened so far with AAA Better, for example. I now have sort of courage to put out my own Premier League ideas in terms of my personal bets, etc. Okay, so the terms of tipsters that I want to prioritize moving forward, I think I really want to have it so there's a majority of bettors that are sort of tipping in that 1.8 to 2.2 price range, because I just prefer a portfolio that isn't super volatile, and I think that's a lot different here than it might be on other platforms where it's almost 80% higher odds ranges. I think I prefer most the tipsters to be closer to evens, or maybe around 3.0 for example, because I just think it's a lot easier to deal with in terms of variance. For example, we've made profit on our last 6 days, which, you know, is very uncommon for a betting portfolio, and it's something that I'm, you know, proud of the fact that we're creating something very kind of sustainable for, you know, continuous betting bank growth, I hope, in future. And if you follow enough tipsters, it should be quite a smooth ride. In terms of general specifics, if anyone's interested, I am interested in sort of getting a WTA tipster, because obviously I'm not doing that anymore, and that would be nice, obviously, so it would give me a bit more of an insight into that code, as I'm not really following it anymore. But also international cricket and IPL, that's obviously huge now on the Betfair exchange, and lots of options for the bookies, but I haven't really come across cricket tipster. MMA and UFC, obviously that's an exploding space now, and I think it's only going to get bigger. So I mean, it would be great to have a tipster from that section. And then sort of a bit more niche, but even stuff like in-play football, on the exchange, trading, because that's something that I know that if I've got more time, I'm gonna sort of dabble around with that a bit more in future. And I think there's a lot of potential there for not necessarily trading, but more angles that you might trade but also have betting value at anyway if you play it straight. Because I know from experience now, from having a subscription at Gold Profits, that there's a lot of opportunities in the in-play football markets, which obviously Bonds does on Bet365, but I think it's even possible on, you know, larger markets as well. So I'm certainly kind of curious about that as well. So yeah, hopefully I've given a kind of overview of why I have certain tipsters on the platform, and what I'm going to be looking for moving forward with any new tipsters I have moving forward with us. So cheers guys, and catch up soon.